wonderful to be here with all of you, people who think deeply about the world, challenge assumptions, understand that capital doesn't just move markets, it moves and changes lives. Before I dive in, a quick word on why I might be here. My career began long ago at Shearson Lehman Brothers. I was hired by Lehman Brothers, but I started on the Shearson side, and many of you have probably never heard of Shearson, which probably proves that I'm one of the older people in the room. That firm went through a lot of mergers, acquisitions, rebranding, and eventually became Morgan Stanley. I was a managing director when Citigroup, the largest bank in the world, acquired Smith Barney. All of that is just context for a really brief talk about investing, life, and uncertainty. I've lived through a lot of chaos, a lot of change, and those experiences have shaped the way, not only how I invest, but the way I live. I started a firm called LVW Advisors. There's a bio out there. But it has its roots now today in this institutional practice that I built within all of these firms that changed and merged. It was a $6 billion practice. I grew it vertically. I mentored and trained a team. And now we manage money for institutions, for wealthy families. Most have the goal of wanting to live, meaning the wealth, in perpetuity. And what I've learned is that life and investing are deeply connected. They don't live in parallel universes. They inform each other every day. When you sit with clients and you talk with them about the purpose of their wealth, what we hear is pretty clear. Their purpose, their values, their lives, the way they invest are inseparable. Yes, the world feels uncertain, and in 8 or 10 minutes, that's what I'm supposed to talk about. But the world has always been uncertain, and investing's always been uncertain, and life is always uncertain. So we have the velocity of AI, we have quantum, which has been so wonderful to hear about today. We've talked a little bit about political polarization, economic fragmentation, geopolitical tension. But in many ways, this is the same old story. Societies change, technology reshapes behavior and markets, and people adapt. The headlines feel dramatic, but the forces underneath are familiar. What does change, and has always changed, are the tools we use and the choices that we make. My first week on the job in my career was in October of 1987. It started with Black Monday. For those of you who may not have been alive or don't remember, Black Monday remains the largest one-day percentage drop in U.S. market history. The Dow fell more than 22% in a single trading session. It was stunning. I worked as a trainee in the World Trade Center on the top floor of World Trade II. But I was on the trading floor that day, out of the training program, brand new, watching terminals. They were terminals, they weren't screens. Turn red, phones ringing, people running around screaming. And I stood next to this guy who had been in the business quite a while and leaned over and asked him, "Does this always happen?" That moment taught me uncertainty is not an anomaly. It's the job and it's life. Since then, I've lived through long-term capital, the dot-com bubble, the GFC, COVID, like you all have, and everything in between. The cast of characters changes, the underlying patterns do not. Years later, those patterns would show up again, this time in my personal life, and I wrote a book. I didn't set out to write a book, but after the sudden loss of my husband, alive at 11 o'clock and dead at 1 p.m., a relatively young, very healthy person, I started journaling to survive. A year and a half later, I lost my mom, who had worked with me in my business for years and was my best friend, also very suddenly. So I kept writing. I'm a long-distance runner. I meditated. I prayed. I tried to make sense of life, all the uncertainty. And 2 years in, I took all these scraps of paper, these voice notes. I looked at all of this, and I heard a voice I'm pretty convinced was not my own say, "This is a book, and it's not for you." So my sons, I have 2 of them, encouraged me to publish. My younger son became my editor. I then hired a professional editor. I felt I needed to hire a legal team to tell these Wall Street stories and some of my life stories. But the book's about resilience, disruption, reinvention, and the choices we make when everything seems uncertain and different. And that's exactly the world we live in today. One of the things I've learned is that resilience is super important. It's to try to teach people what that means or how to achieve it, because the best lives and the best investments share that. In 2008, after building a $6 billion business within Citigroup, it was really a practice. It was a little bit ahead of its time. I decided to go independent into the registered investment advisory space, which is a lot of vernacular and words, but most people were working in big banks. They weren't going out independent. I just felt it was the right thing to do. I wanted to avoid the conflicts of interest. I was tired of fighting battles. I left August 31st, 2008. 1 week later, we were in the teeth of the financial crisis. Every client followed my team, and then, a week after that, a summons arrived on my desk, at that time from Citigroup, the largest bank in the world, suing me, basically me, and my team for breach of contract, fraud, misappropriation, unfair competition, corporate rating, and my favorite one, intellectual property theft, which I still believe is an oxymoron. We'd followed every legal protocol, we'd done nothing wrong, but the lawsuit dragged on for 2 years. When FINRA, the governing body, heard the case, it went in front of arbitrators. About a month later, all the charges were dismissed. We won. My legal fees were enormous. The business was in rubble. But I knew I had to rebuild it. So this is investing, and this is life. Resilience is not just surviving, it's standing for what you believe in, knowing your risks, and holding your ground when the world tilts. So what else? Very briefly, patterns matter. In investing, we study things in the public markets like cash flow, pricing power, management quality, adaptability, moats. In life, patterns are even more powerful. Do you rush decisions? Do you avoid conflict? Do you stay too long at the party? Do you pivot too often or not at all? Markets price in patterns, life does too. And if you don't recognize your own patterns, the world will, and it won't give you the benefit of the doubt. And a couple last things. Risk isn't the enemy. Blind risk is. People ask me a lot, are you afraid of risk? At this point, I'm not afraid of much. But unexamined risk is pretty scary. Blind risk is dumb. Following hype, chasing the crowd, buying a story you haven't understood. But intelligent risk is different. Everything's a risk. A relationship is a risk, a leadership move is a risk, sometimes telling the truth is a risk. But purposeful risk is where breakthroughs come from, both in markets, investing, managing wealth, and in life. And finally, humility, which a lot of people talk about, but it is really kind of a quiet superpower. Self-examination, self-awareness. It's the most underrated form of intelligence. I've embraced this for a while, having had a lot of failures, and I've taught my people to do postmortems on their failures. Why did this happen? And it's not to avoid failure, it's to avoid the same mistakes. So look in the dark corners. And in closing, everything I've shared today about patterns, resilience, intelligent risk, self-awareness, came from real events in my career and in my life, and they're reflected in storytelling in Running with Grace, which is my book. You can find it on Amazon. This is not a pitch for me. It will never replace my day job. I will never break even on this book. But it did get quite a bit of critical acclaim, shocking to me, and became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. So I hope that you read it. I would be honored if you read it. And if you feel like talking about any of these things, please reach out to me. Thank you for your time, and happy Thanksgiving for those that celebrate it.